chilling out there. But I'm really glad you guys are here. It feels really good to be up here. We're doing a Mark series. So hopefully you guys know we've been doing a Mark challenge, which is basically been trying to rally the whole church to read Mark together. Right? There's something cool when a body of people commits to reading the same thing together and allowing that book to shape them and move in them. So we are at Mark chapter 8. So turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 8. Most Mark scholars, are you ready, would say that Mark 8, this passage that we're going to talk about tonight, is the climax of the entire book. So if you're confused, because last week Austin preached on Mark chapter 8, I had to double dip, and I had to do 2 from Mark chapter 8 because it is that good. So go to verse 27. Mark chapter 8, verse 27. We're going to just read that first verse. It says, Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. And as they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" I remember, it's crazy because Ann and I have been together 9 years. So this is pre-Aaron. I was on a date with the girls. This was like 11 years ago. I was on a date, and I was at Irvine Spectrum. And this is this awkward moment where I'm on the date, but then you run into somebody that you know. Does that ever happen? Me and Rachel will talk to each other, right? This is what happened. So I'm on the date, and it's not date 1, it's date 3. You're going to see why that makes sense. And then, so this guy walks up, and I start going, who do I say she is? Do I say she's like my special friend? Do I say, we haven't had many comments, this is date 3? And so I'm struggling. I see him from a distance, and he gives me this big wave, and I'm like, dang, why did you see me? Did I have to say something? And I was really nervous, because this is who I'm dating. You don't say stuff like that. So I played it safe. I overthought it. And I pretty much just said her name. And I just went, right? Isn't that obvious? Is that what you should have done? Okay. You're not labeling it. Oh, wow. Preach it, okay. I was nervous. But check it out, right? I could imagine that being on the other side, you're really curious what that person's going to say. So let's say it's not you that knows the person. Let's say I was with the girl, and the girl bumps into somebody that she knows. I want to sit there and go, who are you going to say I am? To me, this is like that moment for Jesus, right? He's been doing life for a while, but he gets a little curious. And he goes to his disciples and he goes, guys, when I'm not around, who are people saying I am? Like, who are you introducing me as? And look how this plays out, because this gets great. Look at verse 28. Ready? Verse 28. And, they get a little awkward. They say, well, some say that you're John the Baptist. Some say you're Elijah. And others say you are one of the prophets. But then check this out. Then he asked them straight up, but who do you say that I am? Stop right there. I don't know if there's a more important question in the entire Bible than what we just read. This is Jesus making eye contact with his followers and saying, no, I don't want any of that fluff. Don't tell me what they say. Who do you say that I am? I want you to put yourself in their shoes right now. And Jesus makes eye contact with you. And he says, but no, who am I to you? Am I just a teacher? Am I just somebody that's been passed down from generation? Am I a prophet? I believe each and every one of us has to answer that question. We have to. You cannot escape this. This is not applying to Peter. This applies to every single person in this room. No. But who do you say that I am? I think it is the most important question. Look how Peter responds, right? Look at verse 29b. He said, Peter replied, you are the Messiah. In the other Gospels, Mark's kind of a little bit more concise. In the other Gospels, Jesus commends Peter. He says, great answer. No. He says, great answer. Because to say that Jesus is your Messiah, it's so rich. Let me just explain, right? Because it's deeper than I think we understand. By Peter saying you are the Messiah, he's doing two things. I think I have those slides there. He's not only acknowledging Jesus' deity, but by calling Jesus the Messiah, he's like, no, you're not just a prophet. You're not a teacher. You are literally the Son of God. But while he simultaneously affirmed who Jesus was, but he also, by calling him the Messiah, he recognized that I'm somebody who needs to be saved in the first place. Because in order for you to be the Messiah, it means that you were sent to rescue me, which means I could not have rescued myself. That's why his answer is beautiful, because it somehow speaks to the gospel. That is the gospel, right? That Jesus is God, and he is mighty enough to save us, and we are powerless on our own. We are incapable. And Peter very concisely says, you're the Messiah. And it's this beautiful, beautiful answer that Jesus commends. But that's actually not what I want to spend the bulk of the time talking about today. It's the verses after that take a really weird twist that you don't see it coming. Because look at verse 31. Will you? Look at verse 8:31. So Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man, a.k.a. Jesus, that me, if Jesus is talking, that I must suffer, Jesus, many terrible things, and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. That he would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. And as he talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Pause. This is Peter reprimanding Jesus. Did you guys catch that? This is like the cocky kid in class who gets one answer correct and then starts like telling his teacher, like he knows what's going on. Right? You get one answer right, and you start thinking your hot stuff, and you say, really, teacher, I think there's another way to look at it. And that's what happened. Peter nails one question. He gets a little proud, gets a little full of himself, and says, well, Jesus, let me pull you aside. And Peter's trying to tell Jesus, hey, that's not really how it's supposed to be. This whole suffering, this rejection, this death, this betrayal, like, no, you're missing. Look how Jesus responds. Verse 33, Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter back and said, get away from me, Satan. He said, you are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. So Peter goes from the highest you can go, Jesus' #1 pupil. He gets the most important question right, to get behind me, Satan. In like 10 seconds. Talk about a turn of events. And it's fascinating. Say it with me, you ready? This shows us something pretty profound. And that is that you can have a correct view of who Jesus is, yet have an incorrect view of what it means to follow him. Did you guys catch that right? Peter had a correct view of who Jesus was. You are the Messiah. Nailed it. High five. Perfect answer. But totally didn't know what that played out. Because Jesus starts talking about rejection and death and suffering. And Peter goes, well, no, that's not how this works. He had a correct view of who Jesus was, yet an incorrect view of what it means to follow him. And what's interesting is I would say the bulk of us in this room would probably get question 1 right. Who do you say I am? Most of us, we're going to change the wording. We're going to say Son of God. We're going to say you're my Savior. We're going to get close to getting that first one right. But I think like Peter, we really misunderstand about what it means. Because Jesus says, Peter, you are seeing things from a human point of view. Did you guys catch that? Peter's mistake wasn't that he had a misunderstanding of who Jesus It's a human view, a human point of view of how that plays out. And so I was reading this going, what is the human point of view? And I'm going to try to sum it up pretty simple. And I think, Will, I have to slide it there. This is what the human point of view, that's my little acronym, is that when I confess that Jesus is Messiah, I think the human point of view is that then Jesus comes into my life and makes my life better. I think this is the human point of view. I think you ask most of us, hey, what happens when you ask Jesus into your heart? Or what happens when you cry out to him and proclaim him king? I think a lot of us would say, well, he comes into my life and things get better. I think a lot of churches push this message as well. Hey, just cry out to him and all of your financial problems will go away. Cry out to him and everything will be okay. And so it's not like I'm blaming any of us. I think for a long time, this human point of view has what has been preached. I've probably been guilty of it myself. Proclaim that Jesus is Messiah. He comes into your world, and it's better from there. It's easy from there. All of life just is easy. I think that's the human point of view that Peter had. Because as soon as Jesus started talking about suffering, rejection, persecution, Peter went, whoa! I wasn't signing up for that. I thought Jesus claimed he was Messiah and we'd rise to the top. We rule, we overthrow Rome. We become the leaders and the high priests of Israel. And Jesus goes, oh, no. See, Peter, that's the human point of view. That's not how it works in my kingdom. I think it's good for all of us to pause. Maybe recognize how we're guilty of seeing things from the human point of view. But also right now giving God a few moments to open our hearts and maybe show us what his point of view is. Let's keep reading, right? Because as this moves on, look at verse 34. This is a big deal. Jesus, he calls the crowd. He says, whoa, okay, there's some misunderstanding going on here. I can see this human point of view starting to gain momentum, so let me squash it. Calls everybody together, and he says, look, if any of you wants to be my follower, aka if any of you want to proclaim me as Messiah, if any of you want to say that I am your Lord and your Savior, look what happens. You must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. I think the Jesus point of view, let's see what is that when you confess Jesus as Messiah, you enter his kingdom and now seek to make his kingdom better. See, Peter and most of us, the human point of view is, hey, when I say Jesus is God, he comes into my life and things start to get better. When Jesus says, no, you're missing it. When you confess me as Lord and Savior, you actually enter into my kingdom. And now your life is structured around making my kingdom better. See, one of them still has me at the center. The human point of view, I'm at the center. And Jesus is something I add to my life. I bring into my world to improve my world. But the truth is, at the center of my solar system is me. Even though it's Christianity, and there's a lot of Jesus in my life, and there's a lot of love, and there's a lot of Messiah, he really just comes into my life to make my life. But Jesus said, hold on, prodigal. Let's gather around. Because what really happens is you leave your world behind. You enter into my world where I am the center of it. And you now strive to make my kingdom. Do you guys see the difference? Are you tracking with me? So check this out. Paul echoes this perfectly. Look at 2 Corinthians 5:15. Paul says, I'm going to try to make it clear. I'll put my little Paul spin on this. He said, he died, this is Jesus, for everyone, so that those who receive his new life, what happens? Will no longer live for themselves. Instead, they will live for Christ, who died and was raised. So Paul says, look, when you actually get the new life of Jesus, you leave your life. You die to that. You no longer live to make your life better. You now live for Christ and for his kingdom. Jesus' point of view is, look, if you want to claim me as your Messiah, you died to your life. And you enter my kingdom, my service to grow my world. And this is very important. I think it's important for us for a few reasons. And I'd say first, I think it's important because if we don't understand this, we are going to be very frustrated, confused, and potentially even fall away. Go with me here. Imagine if you were sold the human point of view. Hey, claim Jesus as Lord, and things get better. What happens when you don't get the promotion that you want? What happens when you're 30 and you're still not in the relationship you dreamed of? Or your cousin is still sick? You're going to be really confused and frustrated because you thought, wait, I thought Jesus, as soon as you enter into my life, these things get better. And so when they don't, you're frustrated, and you're bitter, and you're confused. And eventually you probably just say, I'm done, because it didn't work. I thought it was like an 8-ball, Jesus. You come into my life and you give me these things. And this is why Jesus was so important. He speaks boldly. Peter, get behind me, Satan. Hey, wake up, because this is not my truth and my gospel. I want you guys to imagine, right? Lighten it up a bit. Can you imagine? How many of you guys have heard of the Peace Corps? So the Peace Corps is? It's not as big today, I think, as it was 20, 30 years ago, but it's a global organization where you volunteer. So they take you all over the world to volunteer. It's not hard work. You're drilling wells in Africa, you're building homes, you're building orphanages. It is hard work. Now, can you imagine if you signed up for the Peace Corps thinking, I get to travel the world and just lay out on the beach. Like, oh, Peace Corps is going to send me to some radical places and I'm going to just get some amazing photos and I'm going to make these memories. And in day one of the Peace Corps, the guy goes, yeah, here's your shovel. I need you to dig a trench. He goes, I didn't sign up for this. What happened to the whole Tanning thing? Like, I thought this was about like fun, and I thought this was about me making memories. And the Peace Corps guy had to be a little confused. He said, that's not what the Peace Corps is. We're here to work. We're here to serve. And you probably end up leaving. You probably, I didn't sign up for this. I got on the wrong boat. I thought this was the sandals. Nothing against sandals. I love sandals. But you might go, I'm in the wrong spot. I think it's important for us to understand both point of views. Because I think if we continue to operate from one, we, like those people would say, I'm okay. It didn't work. And I think you'll be confused and potentially even walk away and quit faith. My uncle, his reason, his whole life, why aren't you a believer? Because God never fixed my cough. Never healed my cough. That was his reason. As a human being. You rejected Jesus as Messiah because he didn't make your life better in the ways that you demanded. You walked away. This is why Jesus says, hold on, guys. I don't want you signing up for the wrong thing. You gotta credit Jesus. He's never sugarcoated. He could have just tapped Peter on the back and said, yeah, just gonna get easy from here. But he didn't. But that's not even the only reason. I mean, it's not even just that I think we might be confused and burnt out. I think on a more serious level here, the second reason why we need to understand is the human point of view leads to a very ineffective armor. I got a little clip from the movie Ants. Any of you guys seen Ants?
Yes.
Right? It's a little weird. Kind of fell out of the shadow of Bug's Life. It's in the foreground, Brian. Check this out. Check this out. throw 4 around my head. Turn me that way.
Sacrifice. To some, it is just a word. To others, it is a code.
Geez, I'm really bad at word games.
A soldier knows that the life of an individual doesn't matter. What matters is the colony. He's willing to live for the colony, to fight for the colony, to die for the colony.
This guy's crazy.
I hear you. At 0800 hours, we received word that the termite enemy has mobilized. We have no choice but to launch a preemptive strike. You are the Queen's finest. I know you will all do your duty. I am proud to send you into battle.
I'm sorry, into battle?
Dismiss.
Oh, I think it's been a terrible mistake. The truth is, I just came for the speech.
Don't worry, kid. I'll watch it for you.
I think there's people who were following Jesus, getting free meals. Jesus feeding 5,000, free meals, and he's healing people. And people are loving it, and they're coming to Jesus. And then Jesus starts to talk about death, and picking up your cross, and sacrificing. And I think a lot of us do like that. We go, that's weird Jesus is talking like that. I don't really get it. And yet I think Jesus is trying to help us understand. Hey, Peter, you're looking at it from the wrong lens. The human view is Jesus comes into your life to make it better. That's not what I'm about. Jesus said, my perspective is you leave your old world and you fully enter into mine. And you pick up a cross of sacrifice and no longer live for yourself. The studies are out. Christianity is rapidly declining. And so it's fascinating to hear Christians talk about why. Some people say it's culture. You say, it's such a secular culture. Some people blame politicians. You can blame the internet. I think personally the church has maybe become a little bit weak because we've been living from this false point of view. Can you imagine if somebody signed up for the U.S. Army because they wanted to see the world? You entered the wrong thing. You enter the army knowing I'm giving up my life for something greater. You'd have the most weak, ineffective army on the planet if everybody was there simply to receive benefits. And I feel for the church, because pastors like myself and church, we've been just proclaiming, it's going to be easy. It's going to make your life better. Hey, join the Army Peace Corps. It's going to be great. And that's what's caused the decline. I never blame forces outside the church. I look inward. Jesus said that 101. I don't need to look at the speck in the world's eyes. I look at a plank in ours. And I love the church. I'm not saying this from a cynical perspective. I'm just saying I think we have to look at each other first. Because I know as soon as Jesus and Peter starts to talk about this, I see a lot of myself in it. I planted a church. You owe me a little. You have to make my world better. That's why I do all this. I think if we're operating from this, we'll be confused, burnt out, ineffective building the kingdom, and most likely call it quits. And so that's where Jesus, in his love, says, huddle up, guys. Hey, huddle up. We need to have a talk. I don't come into your world, you come into mine. It's not about making your life better, it's about making my kingdom grow. And the quicker we realize this, the more we save ourselves headaches, the more we end up being like that. Like, what? We start seeing our mission and our focus coming close. So let me show you what this really means, though. Because I don't want it to be abstract. I want us to leave here really having clear, okay? I think the easiest way to live this out, to live out a life not for you but for the kingdom, is a simple filter. Ready? Well, I call it what's good for me versus what's good for the kingdom. it's as simple as this, right? Before you claim Jesus as Messiah, every decision is filtered through, is this good for me? That's what we all do. Everything I do is just simply run through one filter. Is this good for me? But yet, the goal would be that as we claim Jesus as Messiah, as we call ourselves Christians, our decision-making gets shifted to no longer doing what's good for me primarily, but what's primarily good for the kingdom. My 2019 goal has been to pack more lunches. I'm spending too much on food. Is anybody else? We commiserate. We do. I spend so much on food. So in 2019, I'm going to pack them. It's a blessing and a curse having an office in Santa Ana. Because I got my lunch sitting on my passenger seat. And every third day, there's someone with a sign saying, hungry. And I'm driving, pretending like I don't see them. Because I packed the lunch so I don't have to buy lunch. I took the time to pack the lunch so I wouldn't have to go get a lunch. What's good for me is to just drive by and eat the lunch that I packed. And then the Spirit begins to whisper, what's good for the kingdom? And it's a no-brainer. You give your lunch. Throughout the gospel, we know we are commanded to love the poor. And it's a simple filter, right? You guys see, practically has a plan. What's good for me is clearly to keep my lunch. What's good for the kingdom is to help feed God's sons and daughters. Let's go to another small, practical thing, right? There's no show of hands because that's an introvert's nightmare. There's a lot of introverts in this room, in this world. And what I've seen is it's hard for introverts to meet people because that's torture. Small talk, things like that. And so what's good for you is to kind of sit to people you know maybe, and maybe conversations you know and you're comfortable with. But maybe as they consider what's good for the kingdom is reaching out to my brother and my sister, is reaching out to somebody who's new. You come home from work and there's dirty dishes and they're not yours. Okay? What's good for you is clearly to leave them alone, maybe send a passive-aggressive text to get the point across, and go watch Netflix. That's clearly what's good for you. But the believer doesn't operate that. The believer goes, but what's good for the kingdom? And maybe you show your dirty roommate extravagant love. And they wake up to polished, clean cups and glasses as a way to show them love. What's good for me and what's good for the kingdom? Peter is saying, hey, what's good for me is I want to get promoted. You see it throughout the Gospels. The disciples are always arguing about who's more powerful, who's going to get the highest seat of authority. They're only thinking about what's good for me. And Jesus goes, you're missing it. It has never been less about what's good for you. Let's take this on a bigger level, right? Let's get serious for a second. There are probably people, if not in here, in the past that have been in unhealthy relationships. Maybe there's codependency going on. You need me and I need you. And it feels good to be needed. It feels good in a deep way that you need me. Maybe you're having sex and the pleasure feels good. And so if I'm simply operating what's good for me, it's a no-brainer. I feel loved, I feel needed. I'm needed in this person's life. But maybe God's shifting your heart to go, what's good for the kingdom? And is this relationship good for you and God's relationship? I think about the business owners or people in business out here. What's good for you is clearly not to talk about Jesus with your customers. Right? It's Business 101. I think I learned that in my first 101 class. Don't talk about religion and politics, because you'll lose business. And easy. I just operate from that perspective. Hey, what's good for me? I can't afford to lose clients. So I just leave that out. But hopefully you guys are getting it. You don't think like that anymore. You think about what's good for the kingdom. And when you begin to see that, you go, it's good for the kingdom is for me to share the gospel and love of Jesus with every person God puts in front of me. Now again, you know how. I'm not saying machine gun witness. I'm saying use discernment though. But quit seeing it from, will this affect my bottom line? And start viewing this for, how does this affect my God's kingdom? Just one more example, right? It is not good for any of us to give God 10% of our income. It's not. None of us. And so if you operate from a what's good for you perspective, the answer is no. But again, you see the shift. And what's good for the kingdom, okay. I think a lot of us can answer correctly of who Jesus is, but we're still wanting to live and view him through a human point of view. And I think Jesus, like he did to Peter, wants to speak to the church of ours, but in our body, and say, we need to see the Lord. And he was crazy. I'm going to wrap up with this. So I've lived a very blessed and privileged life. I had actually been to Sandals Resort. Is anybody else? Incredible. Great. I have done all-inclusive Turks and Caicos. I've been to Bahamas, Puerto Rico, Santorini. I've been blessed to literally, I feel like I've been all over the world. Incredible beaches, all-inclusive, just total life of luxury. And I look at my life, and none of those experiences have had even a fraction of the impact that has me serving in Haiti. In Haiti, for 8 days, in 103 degrees humidity, we worked 12 hours a day, just working, manual labor in the sun. What's good for me would have been to spend money and time doing those trips, which I love. I love vacation travel. And it's just so interesting. I look back over my life, and those trips of luxury had not even any of the impact that Haiti had. Look at this quote from C.S. Lewis. He says, aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Yet aim at earth, and you will get neither. I want you to read that again. Aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Yet aim at earth, and you will get neither. Look what Jesus says to wrap this passage up to Peter and to us. Look what he says. Mark 8, verse 35b. See, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. Ready? But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. If you give up your lunch, if you clean the dishes, if you give up your time and your energy for those that God is calling, you will save it. C.S. Lewis says, if you seek and live for the kingdom, the heaven, you will also experience the joys on earth. But he said, look, if your whole thing is to experience the joys on earth, you get neither. C.S. Lewis ripped those words from Jesus in Matthew 6:33. He says, seek the kingdom above all everything. And everything else will be given to you. Jesus says, aim for the kingdom, I'll give you everything. You aim for earth, you get nothing. I've met a lot of miserable, frustrated Christians, and yet I rarely hear them attribute their unhappiness to them seeing Christianity through a human point of view. But I think it is very fair that a lot of us need to maybe say, is my unhappiness, my unfulfillment may be coming from my attempts to gain earth and my work. And it's maybe that why I'm losing my life instead of saving it. Because I'm seeking sandals experiences. And I'm wanting everything to make my life better. And in this pursuit of improving me, I'm only getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And Jesus in love says, there's another way. Start living through a filter of, is it good for the kingdom? And watch how you then also experience joy. It's not like, hey, dig trenches for 70 years and God will future reward you with some paradise destination. He says, work for my kingdom and watch how something magic happens inside of you and joy starts to bubble. When you make a decision on what's good for you, you're actually left empty. That high is so quick. When you make decisions on what's good for the kingdom, joy. I don't regret giving that meal to the homeless person. You will never regret washing your roommate's dishes. You will never regret doing those things in the kingdom, sharing the gospel with the client. Because that's where true joy is found. And I believe Jesus wants to speak to some of us. So you need to start seeing it from a different point of view. You're not at the center anymore. And the longer you try, the more scarred up you get. I am at the center. Come, follow me. Deny yourself. Pick up the cross, and we will live life together. You will experience a joy that is beyond circumstances, that is bubbling out. We have a choice to say, oh, I didn't sign up for this. Or we can step in fully knowing what is asked of us, but fully trusting that God will meet us and deliver us. And so simple questions, right? What would it look like for you this week to start making decisions through the filter of what is good for the kingdom? That first brain that says, it's not good for you. To pause and pray and say, yeah, but I don't live like that anymore, Jesus. What's good for the kingdom? What's one way that you could die to yourself this week? You could deny yourself for the sake of God and watch how your soul starts to unravel. I think we'd see Christianity start to rise again. I think we'd start to see some pews fill up. I think we'd begin to be the army in the church God had always intended. Who's going to take the gospel to every corner and see revival happen. It starts with us going, I got to leave my world and join His. Jesus, thank you that you were so gracious to us. Thank you, Jesus, that when we fall short and when we blow by that homeless person, or when we stay in that relationship, or when we fail to share your good news with the client, God, that your grace abounds. And you are not embarrassed of us. Your grace, which is a mighty river, swallows up our imperfections in a second, Jesus. You are never embarrassed, God. You are never ashamed. You are never afraid to call us sons and daughters. And so I pray that out of a place of love, we would step into this, not trying to earn your affection, but live as if we already have it, because we do. Holy Spirit, help us to see it from a different perspective. God, what an honor to follow in the footsteps of you, Jesus, who picked up the cross for us. God, in this small way, may we pick up our cross and deny ourselves for the kingdom. So guys, we're going to sing. We're going to worship. You can kneel. We're going to pass an offering. I just want to encourage you guys to cry out to your Abba and start asking questions of what would it look like.